Hello everybody and welcome to a very special top 10 board gaming video about starter games. So this one is special because I had previously done a video about my top 5 starter games and I wanted to really expand on that to hopefully get some more people interested in board gaming as a hobby. In order to do that, I'm going to do this a little bit differently from most of my videos where each number will just represent a particular mechanic rather than this game is better than the game before it. With the idea being that you see this mechanic and then you see, do I really enjoy this? So this will give you some nice variety with your initial games, and it'll also give you sort of toe in the water gateway type of thing to see like, yeah, I really enjoy this particular mechanic. So with that, the games themselves are not in a particular order. I will mention the mechanic particularly associated as I talk about them. And most importantly, one of the things that I did is I also endeavored to make this with games that are relatively inexpensive so that they're easy to get, and it's not something that you'll immediately regret if you don't particularly like it because it's not super expensive and it doesn't break the bank. But with that, thank you very much for being here, and we're going to dive right into my number 10. At number 10, I've got a co-op game, Pandemic. So this is my favorite co-op game and it really just works wonderfully. You've got a huge variety of difficulty, especially if you add in the expansion On the Brink. You've got a lot of the very basic ideas of cooperative games, which is working together, trying to accomplish a specific goal. And it's one that really doesn't get old because you're always shuffling the cards, seeing new and different things. Different things can play out in different ways. You've got multiple characters that you can play as. It just works really well on a lot of levels. Pandemic, my number 10. At number 9, I've got the social deduction game, The Resistance. So social deduction is one of my personal favorite mechanics on this, but in addition to that, you've also got the ability to play with a lot of people in this particular game, and that's relatively unusual. It plays larger groups very well, which is nice if you end up having a larger game night. But that said, the strategy involved with this and the social deduction is very real and a lot of fun, but it's light enough that you can still do it as part of like a meal or having drinks or whatever it happens to be, and everybody's around the table just having a good time throwing accusations at each other. The Resistance, my number 9. At number 8, I've got the set collection / auction game, Biblios. In addition, you do have some dice in here, but it's not exactly dice rolling. But the idea is that this is a great introduction to the idea of very typical auction mechanics. You've also got a little bit of drafting involved, very important decision making as you go, all of that kind of stuff. And it's built into this very nice small package, plays 2 to 4 people in only about a half hour. It works on a lot of different levels, and on top of that, relatively inexpensive as well. Biblios, my number 8. At number 7, I've got a deck builder, Clank. So as you guys know, deck building is one of the biggest things in board gaming ever since Dominion came out, and there are a lot of games that frankly do it better. Clank is one of them. One of the things I love about this is that you're improving yourself as you go. It's got adventure aspects to it, and it's just a lot of fun. And it does a lot of aspects really well, in addition to combining several different portions. While it is primarily a deck building game, you also have board movement and all sorts of other stuff. So it makes for a lot of fun at the table. In addition, you've also got expansions, Clank in Space, and all of that kind of stuff to build up and get more replayability out of it as well. So number 7 is Clank. At number 6, I've got the light Euro game, King Domino, or if you prefer, Queen Domino. This set of games works very well, like I mentioned, as an introduction to Euro-style mechanics. We've got things like Take That and the whole I took this thing because I knew that you wanted it, as well as the very simple but I guess aesthetic-focused design of these games. You've got very basic tile building mechanics. You've got a huge amount of replayability with this. It just works so well, and like Biblios, it plays very quickly with 2 to 4 people, so it's great for pretty much any game night. King Domino, my number 6. At number 5, I've got the buying, selling, and trading of Stockpile. In this particular game, one of the things I love is the double-sided board that allow you to change how the stocks progress up and down. You also have the different abilities, the starter powers that can affect how things go. But within this, you've got auction capabilities, you've got buying and selling of stocks, you've got hidden information, you've got a lot of really great aspects like that in a relatively small package that is really easy to understand. And on top of that, plays a decent number of players. You also have some expansions to increase the replayability as well as capabilities of the game itself. So it just works really, really, really well as a game to start off. Stockpile, my number 5. At number 4, I've got the Abstract Certo Game of the Path. So I wanted to have an abstract game on this because you want to have pure strategy with no theme around it or anything along those lines. And Certo really fits that very nicely. One of the issues with a lot of abstract games is that they're only 2-player, and sometimes they'll be like 4-player with teams, but Certo is relatively unique in that you can play up to, I think it's 6 if I'm not mistaken. So you have a huge variety of capability. You've got tile placement, you've got long-term strategy, following out your little paths, all that kind of stuff. And again, plays very, very quickly, but it doesn't really get boring. You have a ton of replayability because those tiles are always being shuffled around, so you never know what's going to come up. Certo Game of the Path, my number 4. At number 3, I've got the worker placement Sulk In. So worker placement, as you guys know, is one of the biggest mechanics that we see in board gaming all the time. There's a lot going on with it. There's a ton of games that utilize it, and Sulk In is one of the easier ones to understand, on top of the fact that it just has a really cool mechanic with the spinning calendar. And that's why I prefer it as a starter game for people who aren't really used to it, because it has the really tactile aspect to it, where you're sitting there and you're physically moving stuff around so you can see what's going on and what you're going to be getting, as opposed to just saying, here's the board, put the thing, get the thing. And it's really neat to see how your workers evolve from there. And of course, it works as a great jumping off point for other worker placements like alchemists, potentially viticulture, all of those kinds of things. Sulk In, my number 3. At number 2, I've got the beautiful set collection that is Azul. In addition to a set collection mechanic, you also see a lot of drafting. You see strategy in terms of not exactly take that, but more like, oh no, you need to take that now because it's all that's left types of mechanics in this game. And it really does it in a wonderful way. As with most of these, it's very concise, it's well designed, it doesn't take a long time to learn at all, and it is very, very replayable because everything is pretty abstract in terms of how you design and trying to plan out not only your own personal board, but looking at the collective board, seeing what people do, and all of that kind of thing. There is a lot going on with this game, and it works wonderfully as a first one, in addition to the fact that aesthetically, you really can't beat it. Azul, my number 2. At number 1, I've got the card building and general competitive game that is Evolution. This is a great foray into the idea of overall competitive gaming, as well as the idea of utilizing cards not only as resources, but also to build up specific things in front of you as you go. It also gives you a great idea of, well, it's okay to make sacrifices sometimes in board games because you absolutely have to do that if you ever hope to win at Evolution. In addition, you also look at a little bit of planning in terms of having things to the left and or right, and what can affect them and what cannot. So it works great on several different levels, in addition to the idea that you've got some wonderful expansions. We've got Oceans coming out in not too long after the Kickstarter wrapped up, and it just works very, very well. Evolution, my number 1. Well, everybody, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video on my top 10 starter board games. Like I mentioned before, I wanted to focus more on the mechanical aspect of this and sort of introduce the idea of these different things that we see all across the board gaming spectrum. And in addition, wanted to have ones that are relatively simple, at least, that you can replay over and over and over, so they won't get old in your collection very quickly. But as always, you guys know I love to hear from you. What are your personal thoughts on this? How would you design your own starter game list? Would you go with something like I did, or would you go with something that just works well for new players? Let me know anything and everything in the comments below. And as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my various social media pages, as well as my Patreon page. On all of those, you can interact with myself, my channel, and all sorts of other cool stuff in a bunch of really neat ways. But with that, thank you so much again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.